that the leader's job of an organization is to be able to see what's coming. Because if they can't see what's coming, they become the blind leading the blind.
And this is a tool that allows us to see, even before we bring somebody on board, where are the strengths and weaknesses in how they think, how they make decisions.
I think it's fair to say this has been proven over and over and over again in its viability.
Yeah.
It's not 100% accurate,
Nope.
but it is statistically viable to a very strong amount.
Yeah.
During the rise of Adolf Hitler, an appellate judge named Robert Hartman escaped Nazi Germany, fled to England, and eventually settled in the U.S. He worked for Walt Disney in the early 50s as his personal coach and executive consultant until he could no longer ignore his life's calling. He left a thriving career and an opportunity at Disney to become a professor and threw himself into his research, answering a burning question that haunted him from what he saw in Germany. He had seen Hitler train a nation to do evil, and his question was, can you train people to do good? He eventually discovered and proved the answer was yes. And it all boiled down to training people to have good judgment. And to do that, you have to be able to accurately measure the 70 plus attributes that cause you and I and the people we lead to either make good decisions in the moment or poor ones. Sound too good to be true? Well, most people thought that too. But in the early 1970s, Robert Hartman was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize for discovering how to measure the attributes of good judgment. We're going to talk about the power of this discovery and how it's a game changer in running your business. So let's get to it. So today we're talking about the judgment index and the power it has in business and evaluating good judgment. I mean, there's a lot behind this.
Mm-hmm.
Let's kind of orientate people on what the judgment index is. What does it actually do at a high level?
At a high level, it allows people to do an assessment that structures their values, essentially. How do I orient myself in the world? And what it does is it gives us insight in a powerful and profound way to what goes into making a good decision. And does this person have a value system that would lead them to good decision making, right? So how many times have you sort of interacted with a person or hired a person and they do something and you're like, where did that come from? Or why didn't they think about X, right? And this is a tool that allows us to see, even before we bring somebody on board, where are the strengths and weaknesses in how they think, how they make decisions. Because what Hartman discovered, and what is true, I think, about who we are as human beings, is we make decisions based on our values.
So that's where the values come in.
Yep.
So the assessment doesn't structure your values.
No.
It organizes your values.
Yeah. It says how you organize them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought I heard you say earlier that it's
no,
a
it
tool
gives,
that structures your
No, it
values.
doesn't structure your values. It does not structure your values. It gives structure and shows someone on the outside how you structure your values.
And the power of that and this whole idea of decision making is pretty significant, because he did discover and came across ways to values. A lot of times values are a fuzzy term we use, right? So values are this thing that we all have them. We all agree that we have them, but how do you define what is a value and what's not a value? And are there an infinite amount of values, or is it measurable or not? There's a lot of people who would say, you know what, that's just kind of a fuzzy thing. I feel it, it's there. But when he came down to it, he started realizing there was basically a set of core values that could actually be measured mathematically, right? That actually weren't as fuzzy as human beings thought. It's just that we're not always really good at articulating them.
Right.
But when you start observing people and you start watching them over and over and over again, you realize we are fairly consistent people, and our values, while there is an infinite amount of combinations of values and different ways those things, I shouldn't say infinite. There's like a billion or something. The math is just off the charts with a bunch of zeros.
I think it's like 1.3 trillion or something ridiculous like that in terms of ways that this could be responded to.
The way they could be combined and everything else.
Yeah.
But what, as big as that number is, what it does is there is an immense amount of consistency that can tell us, are you going to make good decisions
Mhm.
And when you make decisions, where do you maybe lean um, strong? Where do you lean weak? And where do you lean maybe too strong?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that's really, I think, unique about the judgment index is it's not a personality test. It's not a psychology test. It's not telling you who you are. It's telling you where you are in your development, right? So if I'm hiring for certain positions,
Yeah.
I need different levels of I don't even know what the right word is, but if I'm hiring for a leader, then how much that person understands strategy is really, really critical.
Yeah.
And that's something that is measured with this. Like, is this person strong in strategy? It measures things like how are you more people focused or task focused? And how in balance are those things? And those are really interesting things because you might identify somebody who you think could be a great leader in your organization. You give them the judgment index and you're like, they're not as strong in strategy as I'd like them to be. Well, you know what? You can train it,
Mm,
right? Then
yeah.
so what it does is it gives us a tangible, objective, not subjective, an objective measurement, a number that we then go, "Oh, like I think this person's amazing. Let's coach them in this particular skill that they need in order to keep growing in our company." So it's that kind of stuff that gives the objective measurement piece
Yeah.
is something that we just haven't seen other tools bring to the table.
Well, one of the things that's interesting is the question might be asked, okay, what's going on? Can you help me understand this more? And how does this apply so that there's a place that we can put it in our head? And the reality is it's used in a couple of different ways. We use it for hiring.
Mhm.
You want to make sure that you're hiring people who have the capacity for good judgment. Because
Yep.
really, this tool measures what capacity does somebody have for good judgment. There
Mhm.
are people who you have no common sense. They
Right.
they
You're like,
just don't have a high capacity for common sense at all. They're
mhm.
like, okay, I know you're trying, but it ain't working. Then there's people who have an amazing capacity for common sense. They're just like they understand experience and intuition. Their intuition is based on experience. They're able to process a bunch of stuff and go, I think this is a good decision. But
Mhm.
there's also these three, how do you make all these decisions in life? But what Hartman realized quite ingeniously at some level is really there was three ways we make decisions. There's three places in this where it comes to judgment. We make judgment calls when it comes to people.
Mhm.
We make judgment calls when it comes to task. And we make judgment calls when it comes to trying to predict what do we need to do now that will impact a goal in the future
Right.
and what are the potential things that could get in our way in the future
Yep.
and short term or maybe even long term. And a lot of times we talk about that predictiveness, that's strategy in the Hartman index, right?
Yep.
And it's for what is down the street and around the corner. How well do you predict that?
Right.
It's amazing how many people believe strongly they know what's going to happen and they are really good at um, telling you when you get there, see, I was
Yep.
right. But sometimes what they're predicting and how they're behaving, they're driving decisions towards that. And so it's how accurate that is
Mhm.
and how well you and how much energy and time you apply to that. So that's the
Yeah.
first thing on the top of it is measuring what kind of energy do you apply towards people, towards those tasks, and towards thinking about what's down the road and around the corner, right?
Right. And what we realize is if those it what the JI tells us is if those things are really out of balance, like I am so focused on people, but there's a big gap between that and sort of the next score, right?
Right.
So if I'm super focused on people, it's possible that I am not going to be great at, say, for example, helping them grow. Or I might give them the
Mm.
benefit of the doubt in ways that are detrimental.
Mm.
So that's kind of one of
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
so you have a blind spot there. Not
Yeah,
dissimilarly, if
that's
I'm
well said.
so focused on tasks that it is to the exclusion of human beings
Right.
or strategy or whatever, I just have to get stuff done. If that is out of balance, then it creates a huge blind spot, right? Because this is a person who you can't approach, you better not interrupt them, they will kill you. right? They will
Yeah.
bite your head off.
Yeah.
So, and then not differently, if strategy is so strong and people and tasks are way, way behind, that creates its own blind spot, right? So it's not just the strength of the score, but the balance of them and all of the interactions that feed into that really create this robust image of this is where you currently are as a human being. And when we're using it in hiring, what's great about this is that many, many times, and we know this, right? We hire based on personality and presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Like somebody comes to the table and they sound great and they have a decent job history and they seem really, really competent.
Yeah.
And then we're just kind of using our gut when it comes to their character,
Mm-hmm.
right? When it comes to like, how does this person actually interact with human beings when they're not on display?
Right.
How does this person actually care? How does this person actually function in terms of, how they prioritize their tasks, how they solve problems, how they do all of those things. And those are very hard to uncover.
So one of the things that seems always crazy about this assessment to me is when we start talking about these things, it seems to like, I can just feel this part of me, even though we've been studying it for several years now, just my brain starts to explode with, okay, these are a lot of different things. And how does anybody keep track of it? And it can't be possible to even measure those things because that's just not how human beings are put together. It's kind of like this if it's confusing me, then there's no way that it could be, which said out loud sounds really stupid because
you're the smartest person ever.
well, and
so
it's
it confuses you.
but it's amazing how much we as human beings actually respond in a gut. Like in marketing and advertising, we always talk about the fact that if you win the heart, the mind will follow.
Yep.
We choose to purchase things based on desires we have,
Yep.
and then we use our mind to justify whether we should do it or not. If we decide to do it, it started with a want or a desire or a need we had, and we're like, hey, maybe that'll solve that problem, and we
Yep.
justify it. And it might be a good justification. It might be how many things have we bought that we didn't need and sit in the closet or the garage or something
Right.
like that.
Right.
Okay. So this whole thing is like, well, wait a minute. This doesn't feel right. This is way too complex. It turns out that there's a lot of really, really, really complex things in the world that we interact with on a regular basis, like automobiles, that there's no way most of us are ever going to understand it, pull it apart. Heck, I used to work on my cars when I was a kid, but now I can't work on our cars. I don't even have a computer that plugs into it and does all those things.
Nope.
So I think it's worth saying that this is actually a brilliant man who created he understood the complexity and he was able to actually account for it all and measure it and track it all.
Yeah.
In a unique way, so that this has been proven. I think it's fair to say this has been proven over and over and over again in its viability.
Yeah.
It's not 100% accurate.
Nope.
But it is statistically viable to a very strong amount.
Yeah.
Speaking in math language.
Yeah,
right?
like 80% predictive,
Yeah.
right? That is in
Which is huge.
statistics, that is massive.
Yeah.
It's massive. When I look at it, and I've been using it with clients, we use it for helping them understand how their team is structured currently and where their strengths and opportunities are. And we use it in hiring. And I think what's been interesting for me is I tell people, like, you need to just take it because it's really hard. It's like, you just kind of go, this is really strange.
Yeah.
But once you take it, and then I'm able to walk you through like, okay, this is what I'm seeing. It is like stunning how people go, how does it happen?
Yeah.
Like they're stunned, right? And when I've been working with, like I recently I did it for a team of 17. And it wasn't working directly with the 17, it was working with the leaders to say, this is kind of how your team is put together and where your opportunities and your strengths are. And to the person, every single time, and I don't know any of these people, I'm like, I see this. This is what I observed. This is what I would anticipate you might experience about this person based on what I'm seeing, blah, blah, blah. They were just like floored.
It's like you're reading their mail.
It's like you're reading their mail. And for them, like there was one specific person they were really struggling with. And it's kind of like that. I know like something's off, but I can't quite define it. And I was able to go da 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 da, 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 and they were like, ugh! Like
Yeah.
you just codified what the experience is that I'm
Yeah.
having, right? So it's that kind of stuff that I don't understand the math, obviously.
Yeah.
No, that's not how my brain works. What I know is that every time I do this with somebody, it is absolutely revelatory. Like they just go, I cannot. How did you get this out of that? Is the
Yeah.
regular question.
One of the things this makes me think of is it makes me think of driving in the fog.
Mm,
The idea that there are different levels and thicknesses of fog, but you're only seeing so far. On a clear day, you can see miles and miles and miles. You have no problem with visibility in a car or walking or in a plane. But when you start entering in the fog and you're driving, if you're walking around in the fog, the idea that you can't see stuff is not that dangerous. The idea that in the
the
fog,
impact is not going to be
the
as
tree is probably not going to jump up and
you might get a bloody nose,
blah,
but you're
blah.
probably not going to die.
And you might see the tree before you get to it.
You might.
I mean, you have to have really thick fog and it has to be dark
Yeah,
for you to probably hit the tree.
that's probably
When
true.
you're driving 60 miles an hour and there's fog, the range of visibility can radically affect. And in fact, most of us slow down. People still drive 65 miles an hour in pea soup fog. And invariably the accidents, especially when we were growing up there throughout California, there would be seasons of fog.
Mhm.
And you would just hear of the pileups on the freeways
Yep.
during those seasons. This is like being able to look through the fog with special vision and being able to see like heat vision and being able to see what's there and what's not there as you're cruising along.
Mhm.
That's powerful, especially when a great quote I read just recently again was that the leader's job of an organization is to be able to see what's coming. Because if they can't see what's coming, they become the blind leading the blind.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so this is one of those critical tools that helps you see opportunities coming farther than you can see with your naked eye
Mhm.
and potential dangers coming before you can see it.
Yeah.
When it comes to your people.
Yeah. Well, and we talk a lot about, the importance for the leader of protecting the culture of the organization, right? And hiring one toxic person, one person who is damaging, right? The one bad apple spoils the lot, right?
Yeah.
When you hire that person, because you don't know that there's something going on, they managed to fool you through the interview.
Yeah.
But when they come into the organization, they are literally toxic. The impact of that financially, emotionally, culturally on your organization is no small thing. I mean, we experienced it. We had one, and in one of our other companies, a hire that happened, and they didn't use the JI.
Yeah.
And this person snuck in, and it was 3 months of tragedy, and then it was another 6 months of recovery, and it was yucky, right?
Yeah.
And it happens across multiple organizations, and it doesn't matter how educated a person is. It doesn't matter, in this particular instance, we were hiring in just a basic warehouse thing, and we were and the destruction was profound because his ability to mess up the team in terms of how they thought and all the toxic yak was pretty ridiculous. In higher level organizations, where you're hiring somebody, maybe they have an MBA and they're a family guy and they're brilliant and they look really great on paper. But then they come into the organization and it's like, this person's like not healthy. There was a situation that we were told of that in a health organization. They hired a guy, and this was an organization that used the GI on a regular basis, but chose not to because this happened to be somebody related to somebody on the board, right? And they brought him in, and I mean, he's an MBA, he's a father, he's got, you know, impeccable competence references, but they bring him into the organization and within 2 weeks, like they're like, "Oh no,
There's
there
problems.
is a problem here,"
Yeah.
right? They give him the JI because this is an organization that's used to that. They were like, "Whoops, didn't do it. Let's do that now." They give him the JI, and what it turns out is that there's a couple of really critical measures that have to do with whether a person values work, right? We call it the entitlement measure, essentially. Does a person see work as something that they get to do to achieve their goals, or do they see work as something that they have to do and they shouldn't have to. Things should be given to them, right? And this guy was super off the charts on entitlement. He did not believe that he should have to work to earn his keep.
Yeah.
And what they discovered was ultimately he was a trust fund baby, this particular guy, and he absolutely felt like he shouldn't have to put the effort in here. He should automatically be up here. He was just entitled. So, what if they had seen that ahead of time?
Well, and that guy also didn't want the job,
Mm-mm.
and his parents were making him work,
Yeah.
and his dad or uncle was on the board.
Yep.
So he was being forced into actually working for a living, and
Yeah.
he was like, "Why do I have to do this?" So that is a true sense, and the only reason they couldn't fire him. I mean, everybody listening's like, I'd fire the guy. You should.
It's great until family comes.
But when you've got an organization that has so much money and so much politics and thousands of employees, and you have a board member of a organization that's hundreds of millions, if not $1 billion company,
Mhm.
and somebody says this is the way it's going to go, well, politics happens,
Yeah.
and sometimes you- for your career, you let something happen that maybe you shouldn't let happen, but you do anyway. And so those challenges, but this is a tool where it can be used in large corporations, but we've been using it more and more in small to medium-sized organizations.
Yep.
And the power of what it can do. So, if we get even more direct, the first thing is this is a phenomenal hiring tool.
Mhm.
If we're going to use it for nothing else, we're going to use it for hiring to make sure that we understand that the judgment makeup is fits the organization and fits the position.
Yep. And even if it's hard to find people, because we're in a certainly a time in history where it feels like every other day I'm like, it's so hard to find people. It's
Yeah.
so hard to hire people. And so we tend to be like, I just need a warm body. But even if you just need a warm body, wouldn't it be helpful to know what the warm body is bringing?
Yeah.
Right? So that it's not surprising. So even in that situation, it's valuable.
So we use it right now for hiring strangers
Mhm.
and looking for the right people for the right organization. Especially what it does is it allows us to see maybe we have 2 or 3 candidates that are really strong, and we're trying to figure out which one's gonna be the best. And we're having all the conversations and we're trying to use our gut, but you're trying to see into the fog,
Mhm.
and you're trying to see into the future, and it's like, I don't know what's gonna happen. And there are many things that are easily hidden in an interview, no matter how good your gut is. And if you have different people interviewing who all have a slightly different gut instinct,
Yep.
then discerning between the two, people can say, I have a great gut. Your gut is, nobody's gut is perfect all the time. So nobody's going to trust their gut, somebody else's gut all the time.
Nope.
You might trust your own gut way more than you should. And that happens all the time. So you can do that for new hires, promotions within the organization. When you find a couple of people and you're looking at the position, you're going, okay, I think out of these two top people, they would both be phenomenal at the job. Which one has the potential to take advantage of the position and the opportunity more
Yep.
during this time of their life? Because it not only measures how they make judgment in general, but it can also show us what's going on. Like you talked about underneath
Mhm.
the external and the internal world, we can see some things that are going on. Are they taking care of themselves? Is there a huge amount of stress?
Yep.
Like there's times when a perfect example would be the person wants the promotion, but at this point in life, there's something amazingly stressful going on in their life. And they can tell you all day long that wouldn't affect them.
Yeah.
But the reality is sometimes the best thing in the world is not to go after a promotion or to promote somebody into a position. because they want a promotion, because it fits their career path, because it makes more money for them. But for instance, my sister had cancer,
Mhm.
right? And at that point, in a huge transition, her husband, our brother-in-law, he could be in a place where it's like he's compromised. He may choose and want to do this, but it's not going to be the best for him and the
Right.
organization at that time. What if you
Right.
have somebody like that? And you're like, you know what? This just isn't the right time for you to move into this position. This other person is going to get on board, come into it, be able to get going faster. Let's make that decision.
Yeah.
If you choose as a business owner to make the opposite decision, it's because your eyes are wide open and you understand all the things. You're not going to get surprised by this.
Yeah. Exactly.
And
And
so,
it's a huge deal. It's significant because, again, depending on what you're promoting into or hiring for, in either scenario, it could be that you need somebody who is incredible at one thing, but maybe it's going to take them a little bit longer to catch on.
yeah,
Sometimes you need somebody who can, like, they need to get to it right now. So their ability to be trained and to quickly adopt and implement those things, that becomes significant, and those are things that are measurable,
yeah,
right? How trainable is this person? And not only trainable, but actually able to execute on the training. So this concept of, you meet people, and we've hired people, and all of you have hired people, let's face it, who feel like they know how to talk the talk. They
yeah,
know what you want to hear, but ultimately they can't walk it out, right? And this instrument, shockingly, has ways of actually showing us that, like, oh dear, this person understands conceptually what to do and what to say. But when it comes to actually acting on those things and implementing them, they're not as strong. And those are things that are identified, which is stunning, right? So whether we're talking about avoiding hiring somebody that could be damaging, or making a good decision, like making the best decision between two really good candidates based on what the job is and what you need, or you're talking about looking at your team and understanding who to hire, who to promote, how to coach
yeah.
your team. All of those things are things that the JI can help with, and it's an amazing tool.
Yeah, and I think just to sum up, because this is really a high level introduction, and in future podcasts, we're going to go into actually some of the details of
Yeah,
those 70 plus indicators and talk about them because it's really worth how do you strengthen some of those? How do you spot them? What's the implications of
yeah,
individual things? Because it's just like it's like the financials in a company. Each number has a meaning. It indicates something, but there's also ratios
hmm,
when you combine those numbers together and you look at them in comparison to one another.
absolutely.
And ultimately, what we're talking about is how does a company actually grow and thrive when we talk about passion and provision companies? And we're talking about how do we make better decisions so that the people on our team are making decisions that are going to be financially good for the company, short term and long term,
Yep.
and fit into the strategy that we're trying to implement and help us actually come up with strategies that are working better. Because that's part of a leader's job is to make sure that they're thinking about those strategies, which is basically taking all the resources you have. What resources do you have to efficiently implement what you're trying to do?
Yeah.
How do you move the company forward? So if we're talking about money, we're talking about efficient strategy. We're talking about not only losing money, but making sure we're taking advantage of all the opportunities that we need to. And you can either squander that and roll the dice, or you can make a more intelligent decision. It's not perfect. It doesn't solve all of the
No.
problems, but it gives you a significant amount of understanding and knowledge if you're willing to stop and pay attention to it and take it into consideration.
Yeah. And we say it all the time, but at the end of the day, people bring their whole self to work.
Yep.
So no matter how much we want to separate, no matter how much we want to say, you know what, what's going on at home, that doesn't affect me at work. You know what? It does. It does.
Yeah.
It do. So just understanding that, how do we take advantage of an opportunity to actually see a little bit more under the hood. And it does, it's not invasive. Nobody
No,
has to tell you the why behind any of it, but there is a sense in which you just get a much more robust picture, especially as part of hiring, but a much more robust picture of what's going to actually cross the threshold.
there's one objection that's probably lingering in somebody's head, or at least a question. This sounds like a psychology test. I know you said it wasn't a psychological
No.
test. I don't know what that means. Uh, but is this legal?
It is. It's EEOC compliant. And EEOC is Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, right? So that's the big branch that says, are you excluding people based on things that you cannot exclude them on?
Right.
And this because it's not, again, it's not saying this is who you are. We're not putting you in a box. This is where you are in the current circumstances that you're living in. This is where you are.
Yeah.
So it is fully EEOC compliant and legal, and again, it's not the hiring tool. It's one of the things
We would
that
say
you
it's
would
one of three
use.
legs.
Yeah.
This, you want to do this and kind of get an idea, and then be able to ask more intelligent questions to probe into that, to see what's going on, because it doesn't mean one thing or another explicitly, but the questions you ask, it's going to give you better questions to ask. Second, you're going to be having a regular interview. And
Mhm.
third, you need to be doing a skills assessment for the position
Mhm.
and for the employee or prospect to see if they fit that.
Yeah.
Because if they don't have the skills and
Yeah.
you don't feel good about their culture fit and everything else, and they're not performing well in the interview, um, and this says there's some challenges, then that's three strikes.
Mhm.
But if you get a couple of things that are really good and something stands out, it works for a nice, like a stool, the three legs of a stool, to create more stability and more confidence that you can lean on
Yeah.
in decision making.
Yeah. And most of the time I would say that people show up to interviews and they don't often make the interview here unless they're competent.
Right.
Right. So the skills, we are assessing those, but it's that N factor, right? Or the X factor, whatever it is. It's that who's this human that this helps bring a little bit more clarity to, and has helped us make some really good decisions in the past, and has helped our clients make really good decisions. So
In a future podcast, we'll talk about things. As we talk about this, we'll talk about the whole idea of what else do you do to coach people along,
mhm.
and what are those things that it can look for. But right now, this is super. I think this is a good start for people to understand and to see what this guy, Robert Hartman, brought back as he was watching Nazi Germany grow in power and in evil, and really coming to the conclusion that you can help people have good judgment, you can invest in good, and you can train people that way.
Yep.
Why wouldn't you want that?
Yeah.